Chapter 6. Closing In. Harry returned to his office to check with the rest of his aurors before attempting to talk to Ambrose. He caught up with a few individuals while the others were arriving. Then he called a meeting in the open office area. He told them that his task team had made some progress on the investigations into the deaths of Kettleburn and Savage. As a result, he and the rest of the team were likely to be unavailable for an unspecified amount of time. He appointed Gretchen Evancourt to take temporary command in his and Sarson's absence. Gretchen was a good choice. She was a seasoned auror, shrewd and articulate, and got on well with Kingsley. Her mother was a relative of Kingsley's, and they had known each other since before the war with Voldemort. When he thought about it, Harry was a little surprised that Sarson had become his second-in-command over Gretchen. The reason, he knew, was that Naz had wanted it and Gretchen had not. After the meeting, he went to his office. He took out the replicating scroll he had for Ambrose and looked at it, wondering how to broach the subject. The scroll buzzed. He unrolled it. It read, "Just arrive, Harry. You know the way. Ambrose." He left the office, telling the receptionist he would be out for a while. He asked her to refer all inquiries to Aura Evancourt. Then he took the lift to the lobby. From there, he disapparated to the old rectory. Fenton met Harry at the door and ushered him into Ambrose's study. Ambrose stood to greet him and offered Harry a glass of sherry. Harry declined. "You were considering a visit, Harry," said Ambrose as they took to the armchairs by the fireplace. "May I ask how I might be of assistance?" "There was a break-in at the ministry last night," Harry began. "So far so mundane, Harry? A simple case of law-breaking for the enforcement officers to investigate." Harry nodded. "It was Hermione's office, which has a lot of protective charms on it, and it's surrounded by officers all day and all night." "That suggests dark magic and ill intent, Head Auror. Perhaps a case for, well, the Aura office. Now remind me, who's in charge of the Auras?" Harry sighed. "Yes, that would be me. Unfortunately, things were taken from a strongbox in Hermione's office." Ambrose raised an eyebrow. "Indeed. Were they important things, Harry? Perhaps things which the head of magical law enforcement should not have been hoarding in her office? Things which she gave people to believe had been destroyed, perchance? Things we would not wish Rowle and his hench personages to access?" Harry wondered why he deserved this. It was Hermione's fault. Then he remembered Hermione would be getting much worse from Kingsley at that moment. "So, you know it was the grimoire and token, Ambrose," Harry deduced. "Evidently so, Harry," Ambrose confirmed. "If there is anything left of her when Kingsley has finished, I may have to admonish Hermione myself. When I have time." "Can you help us?" Harry asked. "Harry, have you ever considered the shape and consistency of history? Whether you have or not is immaterial, for I'm about to describe it to you. History is much like a large, irregularly shaped balloon filled with oatmeal, or porridge if you prefer. Now, admittedly, in many ways it is nothing of the sort, but in one way the metaphor is apposite. Whenever you push down one lump in the balloon, another will pop up elsewhere. This signifies my experience in meddling with historical events. I note that whenever I solve one problem, it causes another to manifest somewhere or somewhen else." Harry tried to speed up the conversation. "You're refusing to help." "I am attempting to explain why I cannot help, Harry. I have stopped poking the balloon. and taken to concentrating on preventing others from coming along and slicing the balloon open. I am particularly busy with such efforts at the moment, as I have intimated in the recent past. But this is important, Harry protested. Think of the harm Rowle could do with an army of soldiers, each with the powers Lydia has. That might indeed be calamitous, dear boy. I strongly suggest you do everything you can to find Rowle and dismantle his organisation before they acquire such power. However, even if he had the grimoire and token, he would not be able to form such an army overnight. The problem with the Alterworld is more pressing and requires my constant attention. I must ask you to solve the problems of your own making. I am convinced that Hermione will be especially helpful in future. Harry leaned forward. They have, we are convinced, several young people they can give these powers to. They have people to train and organise them, so they could turn out ill-prepared, powerful warriors within a few... Something occurred to Harry, and he paused. Ambrose smiled. You have reached a moment I like to call the dropping of the penny. I am glad to find you are actually listening to me, Harry. A splendid skill for an auror to have. Harry frowned. You said, even if Rowle had the grimoire and token. Exactly so, Harry. Did Hermione tell you that it has been quite some time since she or Draco last studied the items? She did. She said she'd been too busy. Ambrose's smile widened. It does not seem likely now, does it? Hermione will always find time for things she finds so intriguing. It is her nature. You stopped her? Harry asked. I dissuaded her from examining the items after I replaced them with powerless facsimiles, many moons hence. Rowle is now in possession of a book of gibberish and a token which will cause all manner of strange effects. None of those effects will include turning anyone into a witch or wizard. Harry sagged with relief and smiled. I must impress upon you, my dear friend, that you should still deal with Rowle and his people as a matter of urgency. They will discover that they have been duped, and I cannot imagine they will be at all pleased. You should, at the very least, prepare for some kind of backlash. I would suggest you mount an attack on them before they discover the trick which we have played. Ambrose, we don't have any idea where they are, Harry protested. I'd love to take them down, but we have to find them first. Ah, Harry, I feel your pain, Ambrose commiserated. But you have feelers out, yes? Harry nodded. Then, my dear fellow, you must trust to luck. And I must return to saving the human species. Harry found Hermione waiting for him as he returned to the auror office. She was sitting opposite the receptionist, outside the office area. Harry beckoned, and she followed him inside and into his side office. The minister suggested I sit outside until you decided if you would allow me in, she explained, before he even had time to ask. I don't know why he doesn't just put you on the naughty step, Harry joked. How was he with you? Hermione flopped onto a chair. Harry sat beside her, rather than behind his desk. He was furious, of course, she said. But then he looked disappointed, hurt and betrayed, which is worse. It might not seem likely, but there is some good news, Harry soothed. The grimoire and token were fakes, and the originals have been destroyed. What? How the hell? I can't tell you that just now, Harry said. I'll tell you later if I can. Anyway, I haven't told Kingsley yet. I thought maybe you'd like to. She grabbed his arm and hugged it. Thanks, Harry, she choked. I hope it helps, Harry smiled. But we still need to find Rowle and take down his organisation. Ambrose said, Ambrose? She asked. What has he got to do with any of this? Quite a lot, and it seems like I'm going to be allowed to tell you. Hermione scowled at him. Harry, what are you talking about? Harry grinned. We'll go to see Kingsley. You can give him the good news, and he can tell you all about Ambrose. What Ambrose said was that I need to get to Rowle before he finds out the token doesn't do what he expects it to do. They went straight to Kingsley's office. Marigold, the secretary, stepped inside the inner office to speak to the minister. She came out a moment later, accompanied by 2 wizards who had been in a meeting with the minister. Harry led the way in. Minister, Harry said, Hermione has some news I heard from Ambrose. The fact that I can say that makes me believe Ambrose wants her to know his story. If you would do the honours, I need to get after Rowle. Hermione's news will explain why. Harry went back to his office to contact the aurors he had sent out earlier that morning. Another visitor was waiting for him. Dennis, what brings you here? He asked. Can I talk to you in your office, Harry? Dennis said. Of course, Harry replied, and led Dennis through into his private office. How can I help you, Dennis? Harry asked as they sat down. It's more about how I can help you, mate, Dennis answered. You asked me to keep an ear out about Rowle and friends. Harry nodded. Well, I heard from one of my contacts that some of Rowle's mob broke cover last night, and my friend has managed to track them down. Who was this friend and contact of yours? Harry asked. Can't reveal my sources, Harry, sorry. Harry tried a different tack. Okay, Dennis. Let's pretend it was someone like, for the sake of argument, Shady Trevor. Why would we believe such a source? Harry could tell from a tiny twitch of Dennis's eyebrows and a slight sag of his shoulders that it had been a good guess. Dennis narrowed his eyes. A lot of people on the slightly shadier side of the wizarding world have no time for the former Death Eaters. Many of them joined up or had relatives who joined up with Voldemort's mob. A lot of those who did ended up injured or dead. If we're taking Shady Trevor as a random example, he lost half of the young lads in his family. Also, and this may be more important, they're bad for business. If they're running their own rackets, then they're drawing more attention from the plods, aurors and enforcement officers. Ah, enlightened self-interest, said Harry. Now that's something I can believe of Trevor, or someone like him. Can you give me an address for Rowle? Oh, I can do better than that, Harry, Dennis replied, handing over an envelope. Harry raised his eyebrows. It's an address, plus some intelligence on what you should find. He's marked bits of it as just speculation, but most of it is solid. After the West Hull incident, it would be madness to go in blind again. The address Dennis had given Harry was in South Manchester, in a suburb called Reddish. The house itself was a small, detached bungalow down a cul-de-sac. It was nice enough, inoffensive, with gardens front and back. The notes Harry had received said the house was very different inside from the outward appearance. In effect, it was a fortress, housing over a dozen of Rowle's supporters, and Rowle himself at times. There was little opportunity for the aurors to watch the bungalow from the road. Parked vehicles would have raised suspicion. There was no scope for the aurors to pretend to be pedestrians passing by. After a heated discussion with Kingsley, Hermione, and 3 legal advisers, Harry gained use of a neighbouring house. It was a former farmhouse, next door to Rowle's house, but separated by a hedge. Harry had posed as a Muggle police detective. The occupants, with the offer of a free holiday involved, had been willing to hand over their property for a few days. Harry had avoided using magical persuasion on the old couple, at the request of the legal advisers. Harry's task team, consisting of Harry, Naz Sarsen and 5 other aurors, moved into the house near Rowle's base. They had to apparate to a service area behind some shops over half a mile away, one by one. Once again, Rowle had covered the area around his base with an apparition-suppressing charm. Each of the aurors had walked from the shops to the farmhouse under the cover of polyjuice disguises. Luckily, the front entrance to the farmhouse was not visible from Rowle's bungalow. Harry was not happy with the situation. There might be over a dozen of Rowle's people in the bungalow. Harry had 6 plus himself. Hermione had offered enforcement officers, but Harry had declined, as they lacked the skills needed. Harry had then approached Kingsley for permission to include more aurors. Kingsley had refused to let more people in on the knowledge of Rowle's plans. This alone would have stopped Hermione from lending officers to Harry. The minister was also reluctant to commit too many aurors at once. He had said it was because there were other cases for the aurors to deal with. Harry suspected the minister was wary of both infiltrators and of having the whole Auror Office team wiped out in one failed mission. Harry pointed out that sending a small force against a larger would increase the chance of failure. Failure could mean the loss of lives. Kingsley had stuck with his decision. No extra aurors. Ambrose's rejection had been a blow to Harry. Now to be in a position with such a high risk of failure because of Kingsley's stubbornness made Harry seethe. He had considered asking Ron to help, as he knew the background. But Ron's presence alone would not guarantee success, and Harry would not risk leaving his friend's children fatherless. He had considered asking Lydia. Her powers could make a tremendous difference, but he knew Ambrose would never allow it. Harry decided the only course of action left was to watch Rowle's base and find when they were most vulnerable. The delay would mean an increased risk of Rowle finding the items he had stolen were useless. Harry had no choice. Every one of his elite team, 4 wizards and 2 witches, was his friend. He knew their families. He would not lead them needlessly to their deaths. If no opportunity for success presented, then the mission would have to be a failure. At least it would not be one draped with the bodies of dead aurors. The minister would have to accept his own part in that failure. Success for Harry would mean subduing and arresting Rowle and all of those in his base. If they could get in without being detected, they should be able to petrify the occupants. After that, they could call in enforcement to help carry them away to the holding cells. That would be the perfect outcome. They had to get in without being detected. Then they had to find all the occupants in the sizable building hidden inside the bungalow. They had 7 aurors, who had to petrify twice as many of Rowle's people without alerting the others. All of this seemed improbable enough. Doing so while Rowle might have defences and weapons based on the old magic seemed an impossible challenge. They had to hope for some advantage, some opportunity.